the unified theory. Einstein was the toast of the town. Every town, everywhere, his wild hair and his impish smile, it all just propelled him ever higher in the public eye. He was a character, in the truest sense of the word, a buoyant persona ready-made for public admiration. There is a widespread sense that to experience Albert Einstein was to brush up against the heights of humankind's defining qualities. Sometimes, even just the opportunity to learn about Einstein and his work could drive the public to excess. On January 5th, 1930, a film about Einstein and relativity was scheduled to be shown at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. A reporter for the Chicago Tribune described the scene.
A mob of 4,500 persons gathered to hear about the Einstein theory suddenly charged the attendants guarding the door. Shouting exultantly, the rioters swarmed between the canoes, totem poles, and walrus tusk ornaments to the main auditorium and seized the remaining seats. The less agile were knocked down and stepped on. Women screamed. Frantic knowledge hunters begged to be admitted. Bruised and tearful women pleaded with the overflow mob. Finally, the police quelled the first science riot in history.
Certainly, the reverence Einstein commanded also manifested in more refined ways.
When I was a very young man, just beginning to make my way, I had been invited to dine at the home of a distinguished New York philanthropist. After dinner, our hostess led us to an enormous drawing room. Other guests were pouring in, and my eyes beheld two unnerving sights. Small gilt chairs were being arranged in long, neat rows, and up front, leaning against the wall, were musical instruments. Now, I am almost completely tone deaf. So, as the after-dinner music began, I fixed my face in what I hoped would read as an expression of intelligent appreciation. At once, I heard a quiet but surprisingly penetrating voice on my right.
You are fond of Bach?
I was sitting next to Albert Einstein. Now, I knew as much about Bach as I did about nuclear fission. Awkwardly, I replied, I've never heard any of his music. A look of perplexed astonishment washed over Einstein's face as if I'd said I'd never taken a bath. He took me by the arm and led me out through the crowded room as a rising murmur of puzzled speculation followed us out into the hall. Resolutely, he led me up the stairs.
Now, tell me, please, is there any music you do like?
Well, I like songs that have words. Einstein quickly went to a corner of the room. He opened a phonograph and started pulling out records. He turned on the record, and at once the study was filled with the sounds of Bing Crosby's Where the Blue of the Night Meets the Gold of the Day. Einstein beamed at me and kept time with the stem of his pipe. After 3 or 4 phrases, he stopped the phonograph.
Now, tell me what you have just heard.
The simplest answer seemed to be to sing the lines. I did just that, trying desperately to stay on tune. When the blue of the night meets the gold of the day. The expression on Einstein's face was like the sunrise.
There, you see, you do have an ear.
Einstein found another record and set it going. The golden voice of John McCormick singing The Trumpeter filled the room. After 3 or 4 lines, Einstein stopped the record and asked me to sing it back. I did, then Caruso, and this was followed by about a dozen more. I could not shake my feeling of awe over the way this great man, into whose company I had been thrown by chance, was completely preoccupied by what we were doing, as though I were his sole concern. We came at last to recordings of music without words, which I was instructed to reproduce by humming. As I reached for a particularly high note, Einstein opened his mouth wide and threw his head back as if to help me attain what seemed unattainable. Ah! Evidently, I came close enough, for Einstein suddenly stopped the phonograph.
Now, young man, we are ready for Bach. Just allow yourself to listen. That is all.
It was a glorious time. Einstein had heard the harmonies of nature, and with his precious generalized theory, had shared the music that was resonating in his mind with the world. And the world stood at the ready for Einstein's next move, which he promised would be the coveted unified theory. A theory that would embrace not just gravity, but all of nature's forces in a single coherent mathematical formalism. It would be the master equation underlying physical reality. Einstein finished his first paper on unification during a long boat trip to Egypt in 1923. And with his newly minted rock star status, that paper created quite a stir. In just a few years, Einstein realized that that paper was flawed, but by then he was already developing a new idea called distant parallelism. And journalists far and wide caught wind that that paper would be released toward the end of January 1929, and did they ever stoke the public's Einstein mania with breathless articles. And when the paper finally did appear, the London department store Selfridges pasted its pages in its storefront window, attracting these massive crowds, all straining to catch a glimpse of Einstein's latest breakthrough. And in New York, the Herald Tribune, calling Einstein a near mystic, publishes his paper in its entirety on the front page.
Now, but only now, we know that the force which moves electrons in their ellipses around the atom is the same force which moves our Earth in its annual course around the sun, and the same force which brings us the rays of light and heat which makes life possible on this planet.
Wow, thrilling. But in less than a year, Einstein realizes that that approach is flawed. By then, he's already developing other ideas widely covered, with the pattern repeating again and again.
Einstein's never-failing inventiveness, as well as his tenacious energy in the pursuit of his target, blesses us with about one such theory per year, in which it is psychologically interesting that the current theory is usually regarded by its author for a while to be the definitive solution. I propose we greet each new theory with Einstein's new field theory is dead. Long live Einstein's new field theory.
In 1933, Einstein makes the final academic move of his life. With the Nazis on the rise in Germany, Einstein accepts a position at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. And ensconced in America, he continues his quest toward the unified theory, while also waging a relentless attack on quantum theory. 1935, Einstein writes one of his final papers of lasting significance on a curious feature of quantum mechanics in which supposedly two distant particles can influence each other instantaneously. Einstein called it spooky. Spooky action at a distance. He thought it was nonsense, bolstering his view that quantum theory could not be the final word, as its proponents had claimed, strengthening his conviction that the missing piece was a unified theory he was developing. Now, Einstein could have been right, but experiments, many done long after he died, show that spooky action is real. Einstein had held to a reasonable, a sensible perspective, but it was as if his intuition was just no longer in sync with the rhythms of the universe.